A tailor devotes his time to making uniforms for the soldiers. This shoe store used to make high-fashion women's footwear, and now the Serb, Croat and Muslim cobblers are making boots for the military. Adam used to live in Germany in the 60s. There he gained invaluable experience.
It was during the Vietnam War, and I used to make boots for the U.S. Army. I never thought I'd be doing it here more than 20 years later.
These car mechanics never imagined they'd now be making wood-burning stoves. Both soldiers and civilians need them because there isn't enough fuel to power the electric cookers. All of this amounts to a token gesture toward the city's defense, but after pleading in vain for the world to help, the people of Sarajevo are now beginning to realize that they've been left to fend for themselves. Christiana Manpour, CNN, Sarajevo.
That concludes this edition of Prime News in Washington. I'm Bernard Shaw. Thanks for joining us. Good night, Susan.
Good night, Bernie. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Susan Rook. A special edition of Larry King Live is up next. Here's Larry.
Thanks, Susan. The special edition is from San Antonio. The guest is President George Bush. Your phone calls will be included next. Don't go away.
Coming up, Larry King Live, followed by World News after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
It's unbelievable. Gimmicks, coupons, phony sales, rude salespeople. I mean rude salespeople. I need St. James.
St. James Furniture, Houston's only furniture store that looks like you created it.
You'll see, St. James, it's wonderful.
Get with the program. You know, program cars from Don McGill's Used Car Factory. All you really need to know is you can save thousands off new car prices with nearly new executive buybacks. Don McGill Toyota's Used Car Factory has fully reconditioned Corollas, Camrys, and Tercels available now. New car benefits without the new car price. Qualify for new car finance rates, remaining factory warranties, and low mileage. Get with the program. Program cars at Don McGill Toyota's Used Car Factory. Katy Freeway between Kirkwood and Derry Ashford.
All banks say their people are special, but you want facts, not fluff.
And our retirement.
Our bankers average 11 years experience.
What you have now, we'll calculate
2 out of 3 are qualified to sell mutual funds or annuities. Most bankers aren't.
And the mutual fund.
Ours are knowledgeable about all our products,
We'll build from
and
there.
they'll take time to
Then
discuss
every
them
year
with you.
We'll take another look, make sure you're right on track.
Sound like your kind of people? Bank United, working with you, for you.
It's the all-new Fright Fest. Only at Astroworld, Houston's biggest Halloween bash. Brought to you by your local Coca-Cola bottler. Every Friday night and all day Saturdays and Sundays. Save $5 off admission when you bring in any Coca-Cola product. Get thrilled by our rides. Visit our new Haunted Motel. Attend a Monster Bash. Fright Fest at Six Flags Astroworld. There's so much. If it doesn't scare you, you're not alive.
This is CNN.
Welcome to Larry King Live from San Antonio. Tonight, the President of the United States and you. He came to Texas to sign a trade deal, but he's staying to take your calls. As the campaign moves into its final phase, it's a rare opportunity to talk to George Bush live. Now, here's Larry King.
Welcome to this Wednesday night edition of Larry King Live. We are broadcasting from the heart of historic old San Antonio, Texas. We're a stone's throw from the Alamo. This is the area they call La Velita, or Little Town. We're right on San Antonio's famous Riverwalk. This is one of the garden spots of Texas, the adopted home of the President of the United States. We're actually at what they call the Arneson River Theater. There's a proscenium where the audience is over there. The river is between us, and the President and I are on the stage. This was, by the way, a WPA project of President Roosevelt's back in 1939, designed to beautify this city. One other note, we'll be taking our calls through Atlanta. The numbers domestically are 404-221-1855. And if you're outside the United States, 404-827-1201. Another note, the reason for the president's quick return, he was with us Sunday night. That program was on tape. We did it at the White House. And the president felt, and quite most people agreed, that it would not be proper to take phone calls at the White House. But he said the next time we have an availability, we would do it. We're doing it tonight. This is a historic evening for two reasons. This is the first time an incumbent president has done a national phone-in program since March 5th, 1977, when President Carter appeared with Walter Cronkite. And this is the world's only live call-in talk presentation, so we're being seen in over 150 countries. The president was here today for that trade agreement, a historic day, an agreement, by the way, which your opponent, Mr. Perot, disagrees with. But Mr. Clinton the other night said he agrees with, except he wants to clear up the part about the environment and jobs. Your comment?
My comment is that it's a most historic agreement. And you could hear President Salinas say that today, this marvelous neighbor of ours, the president of Mexico. You could hear our neighbor to the north, Brian Mulroney, say it. And all three of us felt that this was something that will be remembered in history, the initialing of this agreement. In terms of saying the environmental part hasn't been worked out, it's been endorsed by the largest environmental group in the United States. I think in terms of the jobs part being worked out, we have a $10 billion job retraining program. So I think that Governor Clinton ought to make up his mind and come down on one side or the other. But the fact is, he said he's for it, and I think that part is positive. Labor unions don't like it. They think it'll export jobs, and I am absolutely convinced it will create good American jobs in the export business.
A good agreement benefits everybody. It benefits all three equally?
Well, I'm convinced of it, and of course they are. We have a free trade agreement with Canada itself, and since that agreement, exports to Canada have soared, meaning new jobs. So I don't see how they can take the argument that it's going to hurt. I'm convinced it will help. Now, if you're a protectionist and you want to shrink markets, then you oppose it. But we are not. I am for free and fair trade.
We'll ask you a few more questions. We'll take a break and go to calls.
Let's do it.
Are you geared for the debate?
Yeah, I'm getting ready, Larry.
You're doing training?
No, not yet.
I read where John Sununu is playing somebody in the debate.
Well,
how do you do
I don't
that?
know. We haven't done it yet. The way we used to do it was we had when I was debating against Geraldine Ferraro, which has got to have been another historic first. Lynn Martin played her, and she would ask, I'd answer a question, then she'd jump in and challenge me. It turned out, in terms of history, that Lynn was much tougher than Geraldine was going, So you can overtrain for these things, but it helps to get some questions. We haven't started that. Well, you can get your mind cluttered up with facts, factoids, and I don't want to do that. I want to stay on the main principles of why our agenda for American renewal is the best to move this country forward.
Governor Clinton said the other night that you're a terrific debater, that you're looking to downplay it because you know you do well. You're a Yale graduate. He's a Yale graduate. Mr. Perot, he hasn't debated in a long time, but he debated at Annapolis. It should be interesting.
Well, it should be interesting, I'll say that. I've never considered myself a star debater. I think I'm good on principle, and I think I'm good on making tough decisions, and I hope that comes through. But we'll see. I don't consider myself as one, hey, we can get 5 debating points from the Indiana debate coach that's watching or anything like that.
How much do you think, Mr. President, is dependent on these debates?
I don't know. I think some, but not all. I don't know that a debate has ever decided anything. They always cite the Kennedy-Nixon debates, where people listening to it on the radio thought Nixon won, and people watching it thought Kennedy won. But I don't know. We don't think that it's, be-all, end-all.
In this city,
but it does give you a chance to stand up there and say, here's what I'm for. No filters. People don't need a Monday morning quarterback. You have just heard this or that. They get it whether they need it or not, but it goes right to the people.
So you're not nervous about it, then?
No, not nervous. Not particularly excited about it.
In this city, a couple of weeks ago, Leslie Stahl of CBS made a speech and said that there's a Bush blacklist, that there are people you won't talk to. Dan Rather, Peter Jennings.
Hey, I've talked to Dan Rather, don't you remember?
I remember. She says now, though, is there anyone you won't talk to? Is there any...
No, but there's some programs that's not worth going on. I like to go where you get a fair shake. I like to go where you get the answer out there. And I think some are objective and some are pejorative the way they ask questions. So you can be a little bit selective, but there's no blacklist. I believe I've done almost every program. I haven't done talk shows in terms of these Sunday shows since I've been president. And I don't intend... Well, why? Why do them? I mean, I can get my message out in a wide array of other ways. But there's no blacklist to it. I've talked to Leslie Stahl several times. Not in the last few years that I can recall, but...
But there's no list of people that George Bush will not speak to.
No.
But there are some programs.
Hey, listen, I'm human. I got a list of people I respect in your business, and I got a list that I keep inside of me that for whom I've lost respect. But isn't that human? Isn't that the way nature should be? You don't love everybody, but you don't go around complaining about it or talking about them.
Take a break in a couple of minutes, and then your calls. The last 4 weeks going to be... Are we going to take the high road here, the low road? How do you view this campaign?
Well, we've got...
We're under 4 weeks.
I think you do two things. You make clear what you're for. You talk about your own agenda for Americans' renewal. Here's what I'm for. Secondly, here's what I've done. That has been obscured by the Democratic primaries hammering me on the economy. Then you put the economy... So you put about what you've done. Talk about what you've accomplished. World peace, getting interest rates down, inflation down, doing a lot of things for this country, child care, all of this. And then, reluctantly, but nevertheless forcefully, you factually state the other person's record and why what he is proposing, or they are proposing, would not be good for America. So it's going to be a combination. And I have listened for about 11 months to the Democratic debate, and I stayed out of that, maybe too late, to the convention, after our convention, hearing them hammer me every single day. And I said, look, let them talk about my record, and I'm going to start talking about this man's record in Arkansas, because it's only fair. If he wants to be president, what has he done? He's misrepresenting what I've done. What has he done? And the record, Larry, there goes our palm tree.
What?
His record is a sorry record.
We could use the breeze. What is it like to see yourself ripped up every night, though? I mean, emotionally.
Well,
do you watch it?
Barbara, no, not so much anymore.
Barbara doesn't watch it at all.
Well, she doesn't watch much anymore because it's been an unpleasant year. They had a show in Houston that Koppel put on, and much to Koppel's surprise, he said, do you think the press has been fair? If you think the press has been unfair to George Bush, the place went berserk. On and on and on. And this came as a great shock to some. It didn't come as a shock to me, but I expect Ross Perot would feel the same way, or Governor Clinton. So what I do is I check the news early in the morning.
When you were in Wyoming when the Democrats convened, right?
Yeah, I didn't watch that. You see, ringing in my ears was the voice of Ann Richards, the governor of Texas, and that was from 4 years before that. Where's George? And I thought, my heavens, I don't need that. So, all right, we're gonna. I said I don't need that kind of stuff, and Barbara didn't. But take them on and go.
Goes with the territory.
Take them, yeah.
All right, he's on a roll, folks. We'll be back with your phone calls for President George Bush. On the road.
Every presidential election in the 20th century has had enormous implications for America and the world. Through it all, Merrill Lynch has understood those implications, and we continue to use that understanding to help you shape your future as we move forward together.
Well, it's here. Time for me to step down and retire as chairman of Chrysler. And hey, anybody that goes out wants to go out with a bang. And and we've got a bang that'll be heard from Germany to Japan. It's a new car design that's as revolutionary as our minivan was. It's going to change the way cars are designed from now on. We call it cab forward. What we did was move the windshield forward. Then we pulled the rear wheels back, made the rear doors wider and easier to get through, and increased the width. Believe me, this does more than just improve the looks. It gives you a lot more room inside, it rides better, and it's easier to handle. I think cab forward, like our minivan, is going to get copied by everybody. It has to, just because it makes so much sense. You know, I got to tell you, when it's your last turn at bat, it sure is nice to hit a home run.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
Been a long time.
Announcing the 50th anniversary collector's edition video of Casablanca.
Play it once then, for old time's sake.
He's looking at you, kid.
Casablanca, $19.98 or less after $5 mail-in rebate with purchase of Taster's Choice.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Riverfront in San Antonio on this historic occasion in this incredible year. We're ready to go to your phone calls for President Bush. We start with Arlington, Virginia. Hello.
Hi, Larry. Mr. President, this is such an honor to be able to speak to you. I've been an admirer of yours for years. Question for you. Do you believe that people in America have lost respect for the office of the presidency? You seem to be treated really poorly by the press and by some people at your events, and I was brought up to believe that you treated the president with an enormous amount of respect and looked up to that person as a role model, and it seems to me that people are losing that.
No,
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll tell you why I don't think that there's lack of respect. I can go, maybe not in a campaign time, but in areas where I knew I wouldn't get any votes, and hadn't gotten votes in the 1988 election, and people come out to see their president, whether for you or not. And I think there is a proper respect for the presidency, and I sometimes see a lot of people out there, and I've never gotten to take it so personally that I think they all, you know, love me. But in a campaign, it's different. There's a certain ugliness, and I have told Larry, I believe, that this year is the ugliest I've seen in all the time I've been in politics. But you just hang in there, you do what you think is right, but I think the fundamental respect for the presidency is still there, and it's a good thing, Democrat or Republican.
So when you make an appearance and if there's an anti-Bush sign, you don't regard that as degrading the presidency, it's part of campaigning?
No, I think it just goes with the territory. I do think it's a little offensive on either side if a person isn't allowed to speak. It happens to be common these days if people try to drown out the speaker, and you try to think of a comeback, but you don't get angry about it. You just say, hey, wait a minute, give me a chance.
Next call for President Bush is from Tokyo, Japan. Hello.
Yes, Mr. President, as a Republican and an American businessman in Japan over here, trying so hard to sell our American services in this, for what I feel, for all intents and purposes, is a closed market, I'm extremely concerned about the continued reports of American trade negotiators who retire and then lobby for Japanese business and governmental interests for huge sums of cash over there in Washington. I understand there are a number of these, I like to call them economic turncoats, some of who are in your own administration. Now, I am a troubled Republican, but I would like to know, sir, if you do have a second term, would this policy exist?
Well, I don't think it's government policy. It's policy of an individual. We have cut way down in our administration on this revolving door thing. We put in the strongest possible rules in terms of revolving doors, working for the government and then lobbying the people that you just left. But look, I'm as offended as you are by that. If people go out there and take their expertise and use it against American interests, if that's what your question is. On the other hand, I think people are free to lobby or do what they want. I don't think we want to have a totalitarian system where you tell somebody you can't go out and lobby for whatever your interest is. That's the American way. So what we're trying to do is to open markets, and frankly, we've made some, I hope you would concede, if you're a businessman over there, there have been some strides. We haven't gone far enough, but we've made some dramatic strides in opening foreign markets.
In the worldwide picture, does Japan have an edge on us?
In what sense? You mean
trade?
Well, we've got an imbalance with Japan, but it's going down under our administration. We're doing better, and we're going to keep on doing better. We're going to keep on fighting to access to their market. Cattlemen in Texas couldn't sell their cattle over there. Now you can get in there with cattle or citrus or whatever it is, glass and computer parts of the computer industry. So we're doing better, but we got to keep on knocking down barriers, but not go back to some kind of restriction on who can talk to who.
With President Bush, El Paso, Texas, on Larry King Live. Hello.
President Bush, with all due respect, 4 years ago you called supporters of Governor Dukakis radical liberals out of the mainstream of American values. How can you convince me to vote for you when you have been divisive towards these Americans?
Can she hear me?
Yeah.
Help me with what you mean, been divisive toward the Americans.
Well, you have called us radical liberals, and you have told us we're not in the mainstream of American values, and I feel I haven't felt like an American.
Yeah. If you're a radical liberal, I disagree with you. I don't say you're not an American. I hope I've never said that. But I have a very different philosophy. See, I want to put less power in the hands of government and a lot more in the hands of the people. And that's why we want to hold the line on taxes and spending. And therein, I have a very different approach from Governor Clinton, and to some degree with Ross Perot, who wants to raise taxes.
Liberals are less patriotic.
No. I didn't think that's what she meant, but...
no, she felt like if she's out of the mainstream, is she out of the stream entirely?
No, absolutely not. I hope I've never said anything to convey that, and I don't think she could cite anything I have.
Concerning labels like that, when President Ford was on this program at the Houston Convention, he said he knows you a long time. He campaigned for you in Congress years and years and years ago.
1966 in Texas.
He said George Bush is a moderate Republican. That is his greatness. He hears, he sees all sides and takes in all areas, and he is a moderate. Do you agree with that?
Well, I try to be reasonable to people like that, like her question. I don't think I have ever kind of paint somebody as out of the mainstream, or never, as you asked about Leslie Saul, had a blacklist. I have strong principles. And when you're president, you can't waffle. You got to make decisions, and I've done that. But I appreciate what Jerry Ford says. Of course, labels are so confusing. I happen to think I'm conservative, but if he uses moderate in a pleasant way, meaning you're not unpleasant to people that you disagree with, I plead guilty.
But an ultra-conservative might, like when Pat Buchanan ran against you, he ran against you as if you weren't a conservative.
Well, he ran against me on what he believed was principle, but all those wounds have been healed, just like the wounds in the Democratic. You ought to go back and look at all the things those Democrats said about Bill Clinton. I mean, it is something. So it's
why, they always heal, don't they? The day of the...
Yeah, it's amazing.
Everything's forgotten.
It's amazing. Well, in a sense, that's a good thing about our country. It's a good thing about it.
We forgive and go on.
Sure.
We'll be right back with President George Bush, the President of the United States, live. Don't go away.
Now's the time to drop into your Dodge truck dealer. He'll fix you up with the power of one of our Magnum engines. And to sweeten your deal, he'll add up to $1,500 cash back. Plus up to thousands more in package discounts on just about every truck in stock. Even diesels and vans. It's the National Dodge Truck Sale. Now arriving at a Dodge dealer near you.
This is Grand Central Station, crossroads of the world, and this is the Pitney Bowes 9070 copier. What we're doing is letting people make free copies on a machine that has in excess of 1 million copies.
This is my best friend. I want to make a copy.
I know you want to make a copy. Come on over.
What do I do? Do I lift this up? Voila.
We're still here. It's a little warm, and the machine is still pumping out cool, crisp copies. We've run 1,013,643 copies and had a little gum on the flat glass, but I scraped that off, and the machine is working great.
Now, Billy, can you stand up?
I'll try.
That's good. That's good. Now, can you walk to that table over there?
I don't know.
Walk to the table. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good.
Yeah.
You know, your mama's going to be real happy to see you walking.
All right.
Is my 3 o'clock here?
I'm having a bad hair day.
You're better than my therapist. How about blonde?
I love the shine.
I only use Redken.
So healthy looking. Can't get this at a drugstore. Smells good.
In the hands of today's most gifted stylists, you'll find hair care products that produce extraordinary body, shine, and condition. Redken, the power behind beautiful hair.
Once upon a time, he said he was for NAFTA, the free trade agreement. Then the labor bosses told him that they were against it. So he said he wasn't sure if he was for it or against it.
The issue here is not whether we should support free trade or open markets. Of course we should. The real issue is whether or not we will have a national economic strategy to make sure we reap the benefits.
Nowhere.
The most unusual
middle of nowhere.
Every day, 2 million travelers set out to do business.
SGI travels 65 days.
4 days.
Who would know better what they need than Holiday Inn?
I always rehearse my presentation.
I always
in front of the bedroom bathroom mirror.
We make them feel welcome in so many ways. Maybe that's why more business travelers stay with us than anyone else.
What I miss most is my children.
Holiday Inn. Stay with someone you know who really knows you.
Can't someone pick up my phone? Carrie here.
This isn't Mr. Carey. This is his secretary. Please hold.
Federal Express, I need to check on a package fast.
Keep holding, please. I hear Mr. Carey down the hall.
Your package
Only Federal Express can confirm delivery in seconds. Other companies can take days.
That package was delivered at 9:07, signed for by Mr. Henson.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Federal Express. Our most important package is yours.
Tonight on Sports Tonight, the Pirates and the Braves, the complete story of the National League playoffs. Plus, hockey in Florida, the NHL arrives in Tampa. Full story, 11 o'clock Eastern tonight.
The river, and this is one of America's loveliest cities, San Antonio, Texas. Well, you spend a lot of time in Texas. This has to be a great place to beach. With President George Bush, Campbell, Georgia. Hello.
Hello.
Campbell, Georgia. Go ahead.
Hello. Good evening, Larry King, President Bush. I'm 49 years old. I voted Democrat until 12 years ago. I voted Republican since then. Neither party's done the job. Tell me and the USA why we shouldn't vote an independent party. I like his program.
You like Ross Perot's program? Why should she not vote for him?
Well, I'd like you to vote for me. I think world peace is important. Maybe your mother, and if you are, your kids go to bed at night today with a lot less fear of nuclear war. I think that's a major accomplishment. If you're a Polish heritage, why your home base is free. If you're a senior citizen here, maybe your mother or dad saved all their lives. Their interest rates are, inflation is way down. Their inflation is so far down that their savings aren't being eroded. If you're a small business person, your interest rates are way down. And so it depends what the category is. But the reason I'd like you to vote for me is I believe that this agenda for America's renewal offers the answer to how we can compete, how we can strengthen the American family, how we can save and invest, and how we can do some of what I did today, increase our exports. And it's a program, the answers I think are good and sound, and I'd sure like you to take a real hard look at it.
Mr. President, a lot of newspapers are praising the Perot program while not endorsing him. Well, what's wrong with the Perot concept of we all have to sacrifice an austerity program down the line, top to bottom?
Nothing's wrong with that, except all I heard the program did, I didn't see it, was to say what's wrong, spell out the problems. And if that's the case, I can do that for you. And I think I could do it without tearing down this country and acting like we're a second-class power. What we need are the answers for the future. And I think he's on to something in terms of getting spending down, but I think I'm the only one, Larry, that's proposing controlling the growth of the mandatory programs. 2/3 of the budget comes to me. It does not come to me at all. Only 1/3 does. And so I've said, set Social Security aside. Don't listen to these false ads by Clinton and Gore who say what Democrats say every 4 years. They're going to fool with Social Security. I'm the guy that stood up in the State of the Union and told the Congress, don't mess with Social Security, and they haven't. But what we have to do is control the growth of the mandatory program. And that's not without pain. But that is the way you get the deficit down, not by going out, as Governor Clinton has said, raise taxes and raise spending.
But there will, you're saying we will have to have some pain.
Well, if you control the growth of the mandatory spending programs, obviously you're not going to have that largesse that we've had over the last few years, or last years, since the programs were invented. But we've got to constrain that growth, and that's the way to take the burden of the deficit off the backs of the young people.
So when Mr. Pro says politicians are afraid to say you have to sacrifice, you don't agree with that?
Well, I say you do have to sacrifice, but I'd like to hear some answers. He wants to, at least he did at one point, tax Social Security or go after Social Security. I don't want to do that, and I'm not going to do it.
We'll come right back with President George Bush live from San Antonio on more phone calls. Don't go away.
My favorite line that I didn't get in this election that my running mate developed is when they say 4 more years, it sounds more like a threat than a promise.
For voter registration information in your state, call 1-800-858-9985.
Laura's Draperies, Bedspreads, and more. What can I say? The decorator came to my home at no charge and brought gorgeous fabrics and fashions to choose from. The price was much less than expected. Laura's remeasured my windows to be doubly sure and installed ahead of schedule. And you will never believe that such a rich, warm look could cost so little. Laura's Draperies, Bedspreads, and more.
Visit one of Laura's 5 Houston locations or call for a free in-home appointment.
Do you remember when you became a member? Come on, remember then. You're still a member here.
Year after year, credit union members report the highest customer satisfaction of any financial institution. Because you're not a customer here, you're a member.
Come be a member then. Members make the difference. You're a member here.
Your credit union.
This is CNN.
A lot of the ideas that come into Pip Printing look pretty amazing. But thanks to our Look Smart Desktop Publishing, they go out looking pretty amazing. Desktop Publishing, one more reason Pip Printing is the best business printer in the business.
In the early 90s, the real estate business changed.
I've got your financing seminar, 2 closings, and a showing.
Busy day.
Busy morning.
Professionals took control, trained to use the latest marketing tools, responsive to the real human issues.
He's not moving, but we've got a meeting set for tomorrow.
And one organization is setting the pace. Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate. Join us. Call 1-800-ADVANCE.
United Airlines. In 12 cities, in 11 Latin American countries, they're playing our song. Come Come fly the airline that's uniting the world. Come fly the friendly skies.
It's about 90s style, fashion, decor, and beauty. It's about living, your health, exercise, and medicine. It's about the world, where to go, what to see, and how to get there. It's about taste, good food, and cuisine. It's about showbiz, entertainment, and glitz. It's about everything that interests you. I'm Christy Brinkley. Join me for Living in the 90s. Weekdays, 10:30 Eastern on CNN.
How do they know to clap? Is somebody showing?
We're back with President George Bush. We're live in San Antonio, Texas. And we go right back to the calls. Homestead, Sweden. Hello.
Hello, this is Ralph Kenta. I was wondering, Mr. President, if you're thinking of reducing military costs, are you then thinking of pulling back people from abroad, military people, or will you still keep U.S. troops in Europe?
Good question.
Rolf, the U.S. troops have helped guarantee the peace in Europe for 45 years. You look back to Europe's history, as I'm sure you do, and you see a history troubled before that with a lot of wars. And the United States troop presence there has helped guarantee the peace. NATO is the single most important peacekeeping organization in the world, and I am going to keep American troops there. Some are saying, well, the way we're going to spend for our domestic spending programs is to cut the muscle out of our defense and make too big a cut in our troop levels. And I'm not going to do that as president. And I think it's a good insurance policy for other countries, but I must consider the national security of the United States, and I am absolutely convinced it is in our security interest. And we saw what we were able to do with those NATO bases when we had to go to war, to stand up against aggression. Some were waffling, some were talking about sanctions. You know, many people in your country, until it happened, were saying, what's going to happen? Why? How are we going to handle this? NATO logistics played a very important part in that. And so NATO has kept the peace. It will continue to keep the peace, and the United States will continue to be a key part of NATO.
Even though there doesn't appear to be any apparent danger in Europe at all?
Well, there's no danger in Europe, except if you look in Yugoslavia, you see consternation. I have vowed not to put one single American soldier into Yugoslavia until I know what the mission is, know how the mission ends successfully, and how they come out. There will be no more Vietnams as long as I'm president. And that's one reason the Desert Storm worked successfully.
By the way, there's a story today I'm interested in your comment. It was revealed that Ross Perot told the Senate panel that you called him in 1986, you were vice president, asking him to pay somebody $4.2 million for a videotape allegedly showing live POWs. And Perot said that an aide of yours later withdrew the promise to reimburse him. You know about that?
No, I don't. I do not.
That was released today in a transcript of Perot's testimony.
That I said to pay $4.2 billion?
Yeah. That would Perot pay $4.2 million?
Million?
That you called him, asking him to put up $4.2 million to get pictures, to pay for pictures of living POWs.
No, I remember having a talk with Ross Perot, which is all a matter of record, where he said he was going to go to Vietnam and bring back live prisoners. Look, Ross has done a good job trying to go the extra mile. But I think our administration has had a very good record in trying to expose the phonies that are running around out there, getting the hopes of survivor families up, only to have them dashed. And we're doing much better in getting the Vietnamese to account for the remains. I rode down with John McCain today, one of the prisoners that suffered in there. And he has a very clear picture, and he says, you've got a lot to be proud of, and I think we do.
Cleveland, Ohio, for President Bush. Hello.
Hello. Mr. Bush, I have an article in front of me from the New York Times, which says that in 1981, you sold your house in Texas, told the IRS that you lived in Maine to avoid paying capital gains taxes on that sale. However, since then, you have been claiming that your legal residence is in Texas. You've been claiming that to the state of Maine, and it says that you've avoided over $200,000 in Maine state income taxes over the past decade. Now, isn't that tax evasion?
Nice question, but the answer is this. I have voted in every single election in Texas since 1948. I am the only Texan that is certified to be a voting Texan. You don't have to have that, because when the challenge was raised, the Secretary of State certified that I'm a resident of Texas. What you're talking about is I was denied the normal capital gains rollover that you get regardless of your legal residence. If you sell a house, you're supposed to get a rollover on the capital gains if you invest in another one. We sold our house in Houston, still own real property in Houston, still vote in Houston, still have a Texas driver's license, but in terms of that part of the tax law, I was denied what every other taxpayer gets. And you know why? Because they said the IRS did this to me. They said your residence is the vice president's house. That's what they said. So it has nothing to do with avoiding taxes. There's a nutty left-wing group up in Maine called the Clamshell Alliance. What that has to do with taxes, I don't know. But do you see them carrying banners around, and then it's been picked up by a couple of wackos out there. But I am certified as a resident of Texas and have been.
By the way, when was the last... It's interesting because it's kind of an interesting life. When was the last time you drove?
I drive when I'm, I have my own truck, for example. In Maine.
So you do drive? You
Yeah,
drive.
Got a car in Washington, but I don't drive it very much. I'll drive around the circle in the Oval Office, Oval in front of the White House.
Would you ever do that?
You can drive when I go hunting, something like that. Yeah, I go hunting every year here in Texas, and I drive truck.
That's still a Texas driver's license.
Still, you want to see it?
Yeah.
Let me see. I got to be sure I get.
Make sure it isn't
I'll be sure I
expired.
give him the right. No, it's not expired.
Hen, I like that smile.
Did you say President?
Wait a minute. Yep, President George W. Bush. The White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Department of Public Safety, Texas. It's a Class C driver's license.
Hey, wait a minute.
6 feet 1 inches tall. Sex is male. Eyes are brown. Birth date 6/12/24, and this expires 6/12/93.
I'm legal. See, where's your car? Let's go for a drive.
We'll be back. Don't go away.
We had bought Japanese products 5 times, and over the past 12 months or so, the maintenance bills just got to be out of hand.
So this is your new van?
It sure is. You like it?
Boy, that's something. What is this?
Chrysler Town & Country.
I felt pretty strongly about giving America another chance. Chrysler seems to have really been improving their product, and that was exactly what we wanted.
How you doing?
With over 3 million sold, Chrysler's minivans have been a part of more lives than all other minivans combined.
Calcrew Painting wasn't saving what they'd hoped since leaving AT&T. Schoenstein Pipe Organ Builders was having trouble getting long-distance calls through on the first try. So like thousands of other businesses, they've come back to AT&T, and we want you back. Switch now and we'll give you credit for 1 month of long distance. And we'll pay to switch you back if you're not completely satisfied. We want you back. Call 1-800-222-0400.
Over time, the wrong gasoline could send one of your biggest investments belly up. May we suggest a protection of Chevron with Tetraline, the blue chip gasoline that can help turn your investment around. Chevron, simply smarter.
Go behind the scenes of one of the world's greatest sagas
Asia can be found to the west, and I will profit.
as TBS presents Columbus, the world's first astronaut, the making of the Paramount feature film 1492, Conquest of Paradise. Then discover your own new world
in the TBS Paramount Columbus Isle Sweepstakes. Win a trip for two to Club Med's newest luxury resort at the site of Columbus's Landing with world-class scuba diving and incredible beaches. Look to TBS to find out how to set sail.
As we continue to humanize the presidency just for a moment, here's that famous American Express card which President Bush showed that kid in school to prove that he was a member. It does say George Bush, President of the United States, and it expires in 1994. Signatures on the back, and it's not a gold card.
Modest credit.
Back to the calls for President Bush. Cleveland, hello. Cleveland, hello. Baltimore, I'm sorry. Baltimore, Maryland, hello.
President Bush, I'm a gay Army captain who is still in the U.S. Army Reserves. Today, a Navy seaman on the USS Constellation was given an other than honorable discharge for being gay, despite the fact that he had an exemplary service record and no evidence of misconduct. Now, this type of discharge is going to follow him for the rest of his life. And my question is two parts. Can you explain how he and I adversely affect the morale of the military that you're in charge in? And number two, how do you feel about this type of punitive discharge as Commander-in-Chief?
Well, I'm not sure I know the case, but I do know that I support the military's problems on gays in the military. And if the military come to me with a change recommendation, I'll consider it. But I back the military commanders, and I back those who have lived with this problem, struggled with this problem. And so I don't know if you'd give me your name and serial number here. Maybe we can look into the case. But
well, we're going to put you on hold, and we'll get that to the president. But the second part of his question was, do you think someone should be dishonorably discharged if the only fact is that they are gay?
I think it ought to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, Larry, and I support the military. I make no bones about it, and I have a very different view than some have on service of gays in the military. And I support what our military has recommended to me, and I will stay with it. And that does not make me discriminating. It makes me backing what we need for military discipline and military order.
How about gays in government? Do you have any qualms about
No.
None at all?
I'm sure we have some. My answer to that is, how would I know? We have no litmus tests. None at all.
Lisburn, Northern Ireland, for President Bush. Hello.
Hello, Mr. President. Pleased to be speaking with you. I'd just like to ask that in your State of the Union address, you said that it was America that won the Cold War, and I was basically thinking that surely was it not Mikhail Gorbachev bringing down communism and the Berlin Wall that basically ended it all, and not basically anyone winning it?
I'd give Gorbachev great credit, and I give President Yeltsin great credit for moving down democracy's path. I think most would agree that because there were two superpowers, and the United States was one of them, and we didn't listen to the freeze people that were yelling 10, 20 years ago that the only way you're going to get peace in the world is to have a freeze of nuclear weapons where we would lock in inferiority in some cases. We stayed firm, and we led, and the result is imperial communism, outreach communism, is dead, and former enemies are our friends. So I think we deserve great credit. But let me put it this way. Others deserve credit, too. Others deserve it. When I say we won the Cold War, we did win the Cold War. We and our allies, and we stood firm, and we didn't go with the people that were running around this country, and maybe Ireland, saying freeze it, lock it in, because we stood firm and the whole thing crumbled. And it's been a wonderfully historic period, and the historians are going to look back and say, thank God the United States under Reagan and Bush said strength, peace through strength, not through freezing and locking in inferiority. I'm very proud of what our country did and proud of what our allies did in supporting it.
We'll be right back with President Bush and more calls after this.
Excuse me. Your chain looks a little bit dry. And your handlebars are a little bit out of line, too.
Chrysler Corporation's best dealers, as judged by their customers, are called five-star dealers. And while you can't always tell when a kid's going to grow up to be one, sometimes you can.
I'll have you in and out of here in a half-hour time.
See the kids that grew up to be five-star dealers and get the Mopar Advantage.
Good morning.
In a nationwide survey, 5 times as many homeowners said Century 21 could do the most to help you sell a home. Now, why do you suppose that is? Century 21, preferred 5 to 1.
Diamonds, born billions of years ago, of fire and light. Like love, no two are the same. With a brilliant surviving desert heat, the winding journey down ancient rivers, a miracle of nature like my love for you. Only this gift of a diamond says, forever.
Pip Printing has just what every rapidly expanding business so desperately needs. Someone to handle all the paperwork. Pip Printing. Give us a call. We'll show you why we're the best business printer in the...
We're back with President George Bush. By the way, Bill Clinton the other night and Al Gore said that even after elected, they will continue to take bus trips around the country. They think it's good to get in touch. You have a comment on that?
I think there's other ways to stay in touch than instead of climbing on a bus. I don't think they're going to have the problem, but I you know, everybody to his own desire. Remember, Jimmy Carter was going to go out and do town meetings, and it for some reason didn't work out too well. But
and how about
that's fine. Take bus trips to stay in touch. I mean,
you wouldn't do it.
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm president, and I don't think you need to take a bus tour to stay in touch. I think you can stay in touch by a lot of ways.
How about the fact that some people are saying we see a lot of Clinton and Gore together, but we don't see Bush and Quayle together? Any
well,
reason?
I think we got 2 effective campaigns going. Every time they're together means one of them's not out campaigning in another place. And
so you don't agree with that style of...
Well, I think we've got a pretty darn good system working. I'm very proud of our vice president, and frankly, I think he'll do very well in the debate. You know, I read this thing that Gore is going to bury him. Let's wait and see. Let's just wait and see on that one.
Back to the calls for President Bush, Tampa, Florida. Hello.
Mr. Bush. Mr. Bush.
Yes, go ahead. Turn you down. You're a little loud there, fella.
Yes,
Shoot.
Mr. Bush, I think you are out of touch.
Yeah?
I am not happy with you. For 2 years, you did not recognize that people were hurting out here and we were in a recession. I feel like you have not come clean on Iran-Contra, and I'm tired of your party and you preaching to us about family values.
Don't make a speech. Do you have a question?
I'll put you down as doubtful, fella.
Yeah. How can we trust you?
Okay, let's respond to those 3 quickly. Iran-Contra, fair issue?
Fair enough. I've answered every question. If Bill Clinton would do on the draft what I've done on Iran-Contra, we'd have the facts out there. That Iran-Contra has been looked at to the tune of $40 million of investigation. I've testified to the commissions and everybody else and leveled with the American people. Now I see a lot of distortive campaign rhetoric like this, and I'm sorry, I don't. If this guy had a specific question instead of a speech,
he said his question is trust.
Well, trust. That's what this election is going to be about. Who do you trust to lead this country? I served this country, and I served it in uniform, and I believe I've earned the trust in that capacity from the American people. I've made tough decisions. I have not waffled, been on one side or the other, on the war or on right-to-work laws or spotted owls or NAFTA agreements. Every position these guys take, they're on one side. Oh, by the way, I see the point over here. You can't do that when you're president. So I think I've earned the trust of the American. This guy, I mean, you know, he's part of the campaign apparatus or something like that.
What do you make of the Clinton Moscow trip thing? You think that's...
Moscow?
He says it was just a student trip.
Larry, I don't want to tell you what I really think because I don't have the facts. I don't have the facts. But to go to Moscow 1 year after Russia crushed Czechoslovakia, not remember who you saw, I really think the answer is level with the American people. I've made a mistake. I've said I made mistakes. But don't try to, you can remember who you saw in the airport in Oslo, but you can't remember who you saw in Moscow.
So in other words, you're saying...
I'm just saying level with the American people on the draft, on whether he went to Moscow, how many demonstrations he led against his own country from a foreign soil. Level. Tell us the truth, and let the voters then decide who to trust or not.
How about the missing pages in the State Department records? He implied the other night that may have been Republican hanky-panky. He didn't even know there were State Department papers.
Well, I'm sure there are passport files, but why in the world would anybody want to tamper with his files to support the man? I mean, I don't understand that. What would exonerate him, put it that way, in the file?
Do you really have deep-down suspicions about the Moscow thing? I mean,
I'm just concerned about it. No, I don't have it as a federal case. I'm just concerned about it because it's a pattern here. Yeah, I'll tell you what concerns me, and I really feel viscerally about this. Demonstrating against your own country in a foreign land. I have demonstrators in front of the White House every single day. You go up there right now, there are probably some sitting out there.
And that's fine.
In the war, I was trying to mobilize world opinion and the United States opinion. We had a lot of people marching and demonstrating in front of the White House. Ministers and guys like that oppose the war. And I understand that. But I cannot for the life of me understand mobilizing demonstrations and demonstrating against your own country, no matter how strongly you feel when you're in a foreign land. I just don't believe it. I don't think you should do that. That's what gets me. Moscow, I don't know what he did in Moscow.
Well, what you're saying is, do it at home, okay. Over there, no.
Sure. I mean, but maybe I'm old-fashioned, Larry, but to go to a foreign country and demonstrate against your own country when your sons and daughters are dying halfway around the world, I'm sorry, I just don't like it. I think it is wrong. I think it is wrong to do that.
Anniston, Alabama, for President Bush. Hello.
Good evening, Larry and Mr. Bush.
Hi.
I have a question about health insurance. I work for the federal government at the great Fort McClellan, Alabama. We cannot get health insurance because we're part-time employees. I have worked there for 12 years under this status. Do you know that there are people that work for your government on your Army post that cannot get health insurance?
One of the reasons that I am so strongly in favor of our health reform plan is it provides insurance to the poorest of the poor. Every single American will have access to insurance under my plan, and in this plan, we still keep the quality of health care. We do have the best quality health care in the world, and if you get the government into it further, as some of these other plans propose, Governor Clinton's plan would inevitably end up with these boards where you get the government in, quality will go down. And so please look at our health care plan. It will provide insurance through vouchers to the poorest, tax credits to the next people up the income scale to get insurance, pooling of insurance. We've got a great program that I believe would be just what you need.
Orlando, Florida, for President Bush. Hello.
Hello. This is Mr. Kadri. Mr. Bush, thousands of Bosnians have died. You can save a second Holocaust only through military intervention. Please act and act now. So far, there has been a lot of talk and no action.
May I tell you my position on that? The United States, probably at this very minute, maybe a few hours from now, will be landing relief planes in there. We've done that. I'm proud that we've done that. It is an extraordinarily difficult situation in terms of military. And I learned something from our lesson in Vietnam. And no matter how much the anguish, you cannot go into a military situation unless you're sure what the mission is and how you're going to win and how you're going to back your soldiers to the fullest and then get out. And that is my theory, and that is my trust to every parent who has a son or a daughter in the American military. Now, There are forces and the UN over there that are trying to protect the peace. They are sniped at. They're there for humanitarian role. They are sniped at from the mountains. These feuds have been going on for a long, long time, and one of the prices that the world is paying for the fact that we have won the Cold War and that the Soviet Union is now dismantled and that our former enemies are friends is there are these areas where you have ethnically based violence. And yes, it is terrible what's happening, but when you suggest that we send troops over there, I would say I can't do that until I am absolutely sure, on the recommendation of Colin Powell and Cheney, who certainly have won the confidence of the world in military, that the military mission is sensible. Not just put them in there. We could do that easily, but I want to know that we're going to put them in and win and do what the mission is. And see, I can't tell you, sir, that we can do that right now. And yet we agonize over the humanitarian side, and we're doing our part, as the United States always does, to help in that regard.
We're out of time. Will you come back one night before the election?
Well, I'd like to, I'll tell you this, but whether I can commit to it or not, Larry...
I'm not asking you to commit, but just think.
No, in principle, absolutely.
All right. This audience, by the way, was invited by the Bush Quail Committee, just as the other night the Clinton Gore folks had their audience there. I thank you for coming. Are you, one other quick thing, are you enjoying this campaign, or is this the kind of year you're not enjoying it?
I'm not enjoying it very much, but I feel so strongly about what remains to be done to help the American people, to help the families in this country. We've done such remarkable things in terms of world peace, reducing the threat of nuclear war, that I now just want to finish the job in terms of this economy and hope for families. And we've got
what are we going to look for Sunday night?
You might see a few fireworks. I don't know.
Might see fireworks?
I don't know. It depends.
Are you primed?
I'm kind of a tranquil fella, but I've never been. You know, I'm not a great big fighter, but I'll tell you, I feel strongly about these issues. And I hope I can convey that feeling directly to the American people. And if somebody wants to get into a little hassle out there, fine, come on. But I don't think we need that. All right, good to see you.
President George Bush, thanks to all the people in San Antonio and everybody with CNN. Hope you enjoyed it. See you tomorrow night with Suzanne Summers and Whoopi Goldberg. Night.
Coming up, World News, followed by Sports Tonight, after a word from your local cable system, here on CNN.
It's a problem. You shop and shop. Finally, you say, okay, when can you deliver? In 8 weeks? Who needs this? I need St. James.
St. James Furniture, Houston's only furniture store that looks like you created it.
You'll see, St. James, it's wonderful.
Dare to compare, truck buyers at Clear Lake Dodge. Good evening, I'm Tom Park. You know, we're open right now, and we stay open until midnight, Sunday through Friday here at Clear Lake Dodge. We purchased a Ford Ranger, a Chevy S10, and a Toyota pickup so that you can compare for yourself side by side with a brand new Dodge Dakota LE at only $10,900. It's got the V6 Magnum engine, factory air conditioning, stereo cassette, dual mirrors, sliding rear window, and chrome.
Were you never ambitious? Delivery.
Campaign ads. Some have called 1992 the year of the woman. We'll see how successful women have been so far this year in politics.
And Bryant Gumbel talks with Tom Arnold about his new movie, Hero.
So that's it for now. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you again at 12 o'clock today for Channel 2 News at noon.
Until then, you have a very nice day.
Good morning. Trailing badly in the polls, George Bush has now turned to questioning Bill Clinton's patriotism. In a broadcast interview, Mr. Bush said Clinton should level with the American people on his draft status and on allegations that he led anti-war demonstrations while he was a foreign exchange student. Clinton's camp characterized the charges as a pathetic ploy by a desperate man. Further evidence that George Bush is running scared today, Thursday, October the 8th, 1992.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant Gumbel and Catherine Currick.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on a Thursday morning. We're going to, right after the news, get into a story that is rather complex, rather complicated. It involves a convicted drug dealer who claims to have sold marijuana to Dan Quayle back in the 70s. The issue now isn't so much whether or not he sold, but whether or not he was falsely detained in '88 to stop him from spreading that story. A Senate subcommittee has now found that the inmate was detained for political purposes, and the case is scheduled to go to trial. We'll go inside the prison and talk with the inmate in just a few moments. Katie?
Brian, we're also going to be getting into the controversy over ballot measure 9, which is being considered in the state of Oregon. It would amend the state constitution to classify homosexuality as abnormal, wrong, unnatural, or perverse. Many people are very upset at the prospect of this measure passing in November. We're going to have a debate on it.
We're going to talk about the movie. You're going to talk with some of the stars of A River Runs Through It, and Gene Shalit will look at it from the Critics' Corner. We'll also go behind the scenes of Hero. But right now we're going to move to the news desk. Margaret Larson's on maternity leave. Dawn Fratangelo joins us from WNBC TV here in New York. Good morning, Dawn.
Brian, Katie, good morning. Good morning, everyone. President Bush is raising new questions about Bill Clinton, about his loyalty and patriotism in the late 1960s, saying Clinton should, quote, level with the American people. More now from Jim Miklaszewski.
On CNN's Larry King Live from San Antonio, Bush raised the stakes and let loose with indirect accusations about Bill Clinton's anti-war activities abroad. Asked about stories that Clinton visited Moscow as a student, Bush admitted he didn't have the facts, but still tried to plant a seed of suspicion.
To go to Moscow 1 year after Russia crushed Czechoslovakia, not remember who you saw, I really think the answer is level with the American people.
Bush also blasted Clinton for his part in anti-war demonstrations in London.
But I cannot for the life of me understand mobilizing demonstrations and demonstrating against your own country, no matter how strongly you feel when you're in a foreign land.
Clinton says he didn't lead the London demonstrations, but does not deny taking part. From Little Rock, a Clinton spokesman called Bush's attack a desperate, pathetic act and the lowest form of innuendo. But strapped with a stagnant economy and behind in the polls, it's a key to the Bush strategy to attack Clinton's character and credibility. Even though recent polls show that to most voters, it just doesn't seem to matter. President Bush also predicted there'd be some fireworks in the upcoming debates. If he tries to level these same charges to Bill Clinton's face, you can count on it. Jim Miklaszewski, NBC News, San Antonio.
Air Force investigators are trying to find out what caused Wednesday's crash of a C-130 transport plane in West Virginia. All 6 crew members on the plane were killed when the Air National Guard transport plane hit a house and exploded. No one on the ground was seriously hurt. And in Amsterdam, authorities have now found 49 bodies in the ruins of an apartment complex hit by an Israeli cargo plane Sunday. They've also recovered the plane's cockpit voice recorder. The White House says President Bush will declare parts of the Tampa Bay region a disaster area. Tornadoes there on Saturday left 4 people dead and $32 million in damages. On Wednesday, a tornado hit near Oklahoma City. Several homes were destroyed. There were no serious reports of injuries there. Violent weather hit Dallas as well, overturning airplanes when a cold front moved through. Earlier in the day, that same front also brought several inches of snow to parts of Colorado. A follow-up to Wednesday's story about margarine and the latest research on what may or may not be good for you. As Robert Hager tells us, a new study says margarine may increase the risk to your heart.
Margarine bad for you? Well, a new study by the U.S. Agriculture Department indicates margarine can increase cholesterol. Not as much as butter or palm.
All right, Al. With less than 4 weeks left till Election Day, a story with origins in the last election is surfacing again. The story involves a convicted drug dealer who claimed that he'd regularly sold marijuana to Dan Quayle when Quayle was a law student in the early 70s. The inmate, Brett Kimberlin, tried to detail that story to journalists just before the '88 election, but prison officials cut him off from all outside contact, supposedly for his own protection. According to a new Senate report, Kimberlin was detained for political purposes, and a federal judge has now ordered those responsible to stand trial for that. Representatives of the Bureau of Prisons and the Bush-Quayle campaign, of course, deny that Kimberlin's detention was politically motivated, but they declined to appear today. Brett Kimberlin is with us from the Memphis Federal Correctional Institute. Mr. Kimberlin, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Before we proceed on this story, let me get some facts of your detainment clear. One addendum to this is that your parole was supposedly pushed back. When are you now due to get out of prison?
Yes, you're right. The same day that I was released from solitary confinement in 1988, the Parole Commission added 5 years to my release date. Now I'm scheduled to be released in February 1994.
And you think you'd be free today if you had kept quiet about Dan Quayle?
Yes, both myself and others, including my lawyers, believe that I would be free if I had not talked.
The Bureau of Prisons said that you were put on what they call administrative detention, what outsiders would call isolation, for your own safety on November 4, 1988. What kind of danger were you supposedly in?
As the Senate report found, that was just a pretext concocted to keep me from telling the press conference that Dan Quayle bought marijuana from me at least 18 times and that there was an extensive DEA file compiled on Dan Quayle because of his drug activities.
When they let you out the next day, did they say you were out of danger?
No, they didn't tell me anything. What happened was they let me out for one day, and then they put me back when they found out that I was going to talk to the press again.
Officials said the kind of press conference you were planning was illegal and that you had violated a prison rule against third-party phone calls.
The prison itself set up the press conference, so I don't see how it could be illegal.
If they hadn't put you in isolation, you would have tried to publicize the allegations that, even if true, were by that time 15 years old. What did you hope to gain?
Well, I didn't hope to gain anything. I felt like the people should know about the vice president's character, and that I felt like I had that information and I should deal with that honestly.
What makes you think anybody would have taken your word at that point against the vice president's? You were, after all, at that time a convicted drug dealer and one who had a perjury conviction on his record, were you not?
Well, that's true, but the point is that at the time I was not only going to talk about Dan Quayle's drug use, but also his DEA file. And subsequently, the Drug Enforcement Administration has admitted that it has an extensive DEA file on Dan Quayle's drug activity.
But the DEA also said they opened that file and there was nothing in there to compromise the vice president.
The DEA has not shown that DEA file to the press or to other people.
So you continue to stand by your story?
Well, I stand by my story, and also I want to point out that DEA file has not been shown to the American people.
Okay, but we're not talking this morning about whether or not the charges of marijuana purchase are true, but whether or not you were detained for political purposes, and you clearly believe you were.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The evidence is clear that I was detained for political purposes. I was muzzled because they didn't want me to say what I had to say, and I've continued to suffer through the loss of my parole date and other reasons.
Let me come back to you in just a moment. Also with us this morning is Mark Singer, who has written an extensive article about Kimberlin's problems in the latest New Yorker magazine. Mr. Singer, good morning.
Good morning.
Same question to you that I just asked of Mr. Kimberlin. Why would anyone in 1988 have wanted Brett Kimberlin silenced? I mean, could anyone have really thought that a convicted drug dealer with a perjury conviction was telling the truth and the vice president, then vice presidential nominee, was not?
I think that this is something that the Bush-Quayle people might regret today, that this action was taken in 1988. There's a reason that this happened, I think, and that is because when Quayle was nominated, there was not an adequate background check done on him. There was only a check with the FBI, but not with the DEA. And by the time Kimberlin began to talk to the press, evidently someone did look into the computer. That's what it seems, and there was a need to silence this man.
It would be very difficult for us right now to detail all of the actions that were taken in that 8-day period surrounding the election, which was held on November 8, 1988. But to what extent did the actions taken against Mr. Kimberlin violate accepted policies of the Bureau of Prisons?
Well, in fact, press conferences are allowed by prisoners, so that was one argument that was made. And basically, prisoners have rights. Free expression is a right that it still exists, even if you're a federal prisoner.
So you're saying It was certainly within his rights to have the press conference. They said no to that. It was within his rights to place the phone calls. They wouldn't allow him that.
Right. The prison officials locally in Oklahoma where he was being held allowed it. This was mandated by the director of the Bureau of Prisons in an unprecedented move. The director of the Bureau of Prisons, Mr. Quinlan, was in contact, his office was regularly in contact with the Bush Quayle campaign.
Michael Quinlan.
Michael Quinlan.
You say he made the decision.
He ostensibly made the decision.
Was that normal?
It's unique. It had never previously happened that the director of the Bureau of Prisons had placed an individual inmate in any kind of detention.
How extensive was the contact, do you claim, between Mr. Quinlan and Mark Goodland, who at that time was a deputy press secretary for the Bush Quayle campaign?
Well, this is all documented in a court case that's now proceeding. There was a great deal of activity, contact between the campaign and the Department of Justice during the period immediately preceding the election.
Are you aware of any efforts by the Bureau of Prisons to either cover up its stated reasons for taking such actions or cover up the actions themselves?
Yes, this is all contained in the report just issued by Senator Levin's subcommittee.
Well, I've got the Senator Levin's report right here. Senator Levin's subcommittee on oversight and government management was unable to interview either Michael Quinlan, the director of the Bureau of Prisons, or Loy Miller, who headed up the Public Affairs Office for the Department of Justice. In the course of pursuing your article, you must have surely tried to speak with both men.
Well, they're not really available for conversation these days. They have never been deposed. They have immunity as federal officials. So they're not speaking to the press about this at the moment.
So you totally believe Brett Kimberlin's story?
I believe... I'm not discussing Brett Kimberlin's drug allegations.
No, and we're not either. We're not talking about that. We're only talking about whether he was detained for political purposes.
I believe the court documents that I've read persuade me that there was a strong political motive to silence this man and that he has been held since 1988, has been denied parole because for political purposes.
Speaking of political motives, what are the politics of this story's release coming as it does just 1 month before the election?
The irony is that this is a story that could have gone away in 1990 when Kimberlin sued the government. The government has been the one that has fought this in the courts, and now here we are before an election. There's a hearing on October 16th in this matter in the Court of Appeals in Washington. This is something that the Bush Quayle administration has hung around its own neck.
One man, as you know, who pursued this story for a time as a columnist is Cody Shearer.
Yes.
Whose brother works for the Clinton-Gore campaign, whose sister is a friend of Hillary Clinton's. What's the extent of your contact with Cody Shearer?
Cody Shearer has been an interesting source of information because Cody Shearer is one of the only journalists in America who has followed this affair. It died after the 88 election. Cody Shearer picked up the thread of this. And he has done very extensive reporting on this.
So you would allow there are some political implications attendant to its coming out right now as it does?
I'm saying that I have no political motivations. I heard about this in June of 1992, and I talked to a variety of people, both pro and con. I've spoken to David Beckwith, the Vice President's press secretary, and it would have been nice to have him on today and ask him some of these questions and hear his response.
Well, again, we afforded them an opportunity. They declined. Let me go back to Mr. Kimberlin. Mr. Kimberlin, you are right now serving a 51-year sentence, correct?
That's true.
And you aren't scheduled for parole until February of '94, is that correct?
That's true.
Why, then, are you still pressing this case so relentlessly?
Well, I think the important point is to remember that when you file a lawsuit, the idea is to get to the truth, and that's what I want. And that's why I'm glad that the Senate has asked the Inspector General to do an independent investigation. I also want to point out that the prison officials since 1989 have been highly professional in their treatment of me, and that underscores that other forces were at work in 1988 when I was treated so brutally.
You were, and again, I don't want to get bogged down in the details, but you were classified as a Category 7 inmate and then moved up to a Category 8 and then again reduced to a 7, which affected the terms of your parole. But do you think that your continuing to press this case is having any negligible effect on your status in the prison system?
Well, my parole has been extended simply because of what I had to say. I should have been released several years ago. I'm a model prisoner. I've completed all kinds of programs and gotten several degrees, and I should have been released a long time ago.
Mark Singer, oral arguments in this case will be heard 8 days from now, I understand, October 16. Is that correct?
Correct.
What will happen if the court rules in Brett Kimberlin's favor?
If the court rules in Brett Kimberlin's favor, the federal government, the Solicitor General, can ask the Supreme Court to review this. If the court rules against Kimberlin, he presumably would carry it to the Supreme Court. What ultimately will happen if there is a trial is that it would take place at a district court level, and the defendants at that point might not include simply the named defendants, but might include people such as, say, James Baker.
And a final question for you, Mr. Kimberlin. If the oral arguments on the 16th don't go your way and the court rules for the government, will you proceed as Mr. Singer has speculated?
Well, we'll take it to the Supreme Court, but I want to get into court so I can go under oath and testify about everything that happened, including my allegations about Dan Quayle. I'm not afraid of the truth, and I want him to come out.
And to this day, you still contend that you are a political prisoner?
Absolutely. I think the evidence shows that, and I've concluded that.
Brett Kimberlin in Memphis, thank you very much for being with us, sir.
Thank you very much.
And Mark Singer, much appreciated.
Thank you.
It's 20 past the hour. We're going to come back. Much more ahead on a Thursday morning. This is Today on NBC.
Got the victory celebration that...
No. Learn the holiday two-step at Kroger. It's easy. Step 1, get your holiday two-step card stamped for 5 weeks. Step 2, trade it in for a holiday savings coupon book and save over $250 on items you'll use throughout the holidays. Get your holiday two-step card at Kroger today.
Concentrate, people. Concentrate.
It has always been the universal symbol of luxury, the timeless beauty of the Oriental rug, each regarded as an exquisite work of art. Starting this Thursday at Sunnyland, you'll find these masterpieces with an additional 10% off our October sale prices. Friday and Saturday, meet Royden Malumian, president of Tenjin Philadelphia Rug Company. Come to Sunnyland's dazzling Oriental Rug Show this weekend and save on hand-woven museum
in the Persian Gulf, while the candidate on the right agreed with those who opposed it. He says he wouldn't rule out term limits, while he says he's personally opposed to term limits. This candidate was called up for military service, while this one claims he wasn't. One of these candidates is Bill Clinton. Unfortunately, so is the other.
There is a simple explanation for why this happened.
The Cowboys at noon, the Oilers at 3, only on Houston's 2.
Bush and Clinton. The campaign gets nastier with questions about patriotism. In Moscow, Gorbachev is in a fight with his landlord, Russian President Yeltsin. And a new and dangerous Russian connection to this country, heroin.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Reporting tonight from NBC News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. President Bush has opened a new front in his attack on Bill Clinton, raising questions about Clinton's patriotism during a time when the governor was a student and opposed to the Vietnam War. The president admitted that he didn't have the facts, so he challenged Clinton to provide them. Clinton, for his part, was not amused. NBC's Andrea Mitchell sorts this out for us tonight. Andrea?
Tom, if possible, the campaign has gotten even uglier now that the president has questioned Bill Clinton's patriotism.
Clinton called Bush's attack pathetic, the result of Bush's decline in the polls.
I don't know. No, I just think he's apparently desperate.
Bush said he might have more to say on the issue soon, but...
I thought I expressed what's on my heart last night pretty well.
On Larry King's show last night, Bush suggested that there was something wrong about Clinton's anti-war activity in the 60s and a trip he took to Moscow as a graduate student.
Larry, I don't want to tell you what I really think because I don't have the facts. But to go to Moscow 1 year after Russia crushed Czechoslovakia, not remember who you saw, I really think the answer is level with the American people.
Bush also slammed Clinton for taking part in anti-war demonstrations in England.
I cannot for the life of me understand mobilizing demonstrations and demonstrating against your own country, no matter how strongly you feel when you're in a foreign land.
On Tuesday, Clinton told Phil Donahue he had only gone to a few anti-war rallies. He was irritated when pressed for details about his anti-war activity.
That's a load of bull. I was opposed to it. I was on record opposed to it. Early on, I never denied it. I said I was not a big organizer of anti-war activities.
Clinton said he organized nothing but a teach-in.
I was at the American Embassy, and I went to a group of Americans who were demonstrating in front of the American Embassy one day, and I participated in that.
But in his 1969 letter to the ROTC commander, Clinton said he organized Americans in England for demonstrations. And a Georgetown University priest active in the peace movement wrote that Clinton was one of the organizers of the embassy protest, who invited him to open the rally with a prayer. Today, Clinton supporters accuse Bush of a smear campaign. Senator Bill Bradley of New Jersey, a Rhodes Scholar who also traveled to Moscow, said Bush was guilty of McCarthyism.
What does the president imply? That we were unpatriotic to go? That anybody who has a student who traveled to Russia is unpatriotic? What hogwash?
Polls show that Bush's previous attacks on Clinton over the draft have not taken hold with voters. Clinton aides don't think this latest attack will hurt either, but they are planning to poll on it to see whether a counterattack is necessary. Tom?
Thank you, Andrea. And as the candidates trade shots about their personal integrity, there are growing alarms about the integrity of something much more expensive, the nation's banks. Not yet on the savings and loan scale, but getting scary. NBC's chief economics correspondent is Irving R. Levine.
Soon after he took office 4 years ago, President Bush broke the news that it would cost U.S. taxpayers billions of dollars to rescue the savings and loan industry. Although they saw it coming, neither candidate in the '88 campaign warned voters because both parties shared blame for the S&L debacle. Now the specter of a huge new bailout of U.S. banks. 80 are now going broke, many more are in trouble. So far in this campaign, President Bush has steered clear of warning voters. Governor Clinton, who rarely mentions the problem, was asked about it by NBC News.
There are some banks that are in trouble in this country. If they fail, it will be costly for the bank insurance system.
Only Ross Perot has sounded an alarm.
Well, everybody in America just heard it. You got the $60 billion surprise coming up at the end of the year.
At the Bank Insurance Fund, denials that bank closings are being delayed to avoid an election issue.
That's absolutely not true. We continue to close banks as they become insolvent.
After the election, starting in mid-December, a new law prevents any further delay in closing the banks that are going broke. A new study claims that of the nation's 12,000 banks, 2,000 are dying or near death. The cost to taxpayers of the bank closings will be staggering, as much as $100 billion to protect depositors' savings, resulting in a much bigger deficit and a headache for whoever wins the White House. Also, a nasty surprise for depositors with accounts over the $100,000 insured limit.
This time, some uninsured depositors will not be fully protected. People are going to howl because they're going to be angry, and they're going to say nobody told them this was going to happen.
The biggest blow, though, may be to the U.S. economy. Bank failures could further undermine consumer confidence and delay any real recovery. Irving R. Levine, NBC News, the White House.
And in keeping with the season, the Senate today passed and sent to the president a $27 billion tax bill, which was dead on arrival. This bill repeals most luxury taxes, and it offers tax breaks for investing in the inner cities, but it also contains several minor tax increases, so the president won't sign it. But Nightly News continues in a moment. Gorbachev and Yeltsin, two Russian heavyweights, battling each other now in the streets of Moscow.
Draw from the facts. There's a way to maintain regularity.
A candidate's priorities and accomplishments. Last night we took a look at how Bill Clinton governs Arkansas. Well, tonight, NBC's John Cochran on how George Bush has handled two key areas, foreign policy and the domestic economy.
We've changed the world, and now let's use that same energy and that same enthusiasm and that same vision to change the United States of America.
He makes it sound as though the next 4 years will be different.
The same leadership that changed the world, now let's make America better and renewed.
But Bush has always been cautious about change, even in his strongest field, foreign affairs. When he came to the presidency, he had wide experience overseas. Yet he did not have a policy for dealing with Moscow.
We're making a prudent review, and I will be ready to discuss that with the Soviets
when we are ready.
When the Berlin Wall fell, one of the most compelling events of the 20th century, Bush would not permit himself to express elation. He didn't want to embarrass Mikhail Gorbachev. Bush had decided that Gorbachev was a sincere reformer and, like Bush, a cautious man. So Bush was slow to change horses when Gorbachev's headstrong rival appeared, Boris Yeltsin. In foreign policy, Bush fell into a pattern. Move slowly, then, when criticized, act decisively, as when he worked out a nuclear arms deal with Yeltsin. It was the same in Panama. After Bush was criticized for refusing to help Panamanian soldiers overthrow Manuel Noriega, he ordered the invasion that resulted in Noriega's capture. In Iraq, Bush thought he could get Saddam Hussein to act responsibly by cajoling and rewarding him. It didn't work. But when Saddam invaded Kuwait, Bush made a fast recovery. With Margaret Thatcher urging him to get tough, Bush led the coalition that would defeat, though not destroy, Saddam. In the middle of the Gulf crisis, Bush faced a budget crisis. In order to get Congress to accept spending controls, Bush was forced to renege on his promise to stop new taxes. Because this infuriated so many voters, Bush now says it was a mistake.
I was wrong.
Ironically, many economists believe it was actually a worthy attempt to deal with the budget deficit.
I think the budget deal was good substantively. It wasn't very big, but it did lower the budget deficit a little bit below where it would have been otherwise.
Victory in the Gulf War made Bush enormously popular. It was his best chance to make Congress sit up and pay attention to his economic plan for overcoming the recession. But he had no plan. Eventually, in his State of the Union address this year and at the Republican convention, Bush did come up with modest proposals for the economy. But many voters seem to have stopped listening. Those closest to him still say the president believes the economy will improve soon, that the government can help in small ways, but that the important thing is still to do no harm. That is a perfectly respectable conservative philosophy. But with voters demanding change, he feels he can no longer afford to campaign on what he really believes in. John Cochran, NBC News, the White House.
Tomorrow night, I'll be talking with voters in Peoria as NBC Nightly News travels to a key Midwestern state, Illinois.
Now that Clinton defends, he must hold on to his lead, look presidential, and not blather on, which for him is a big task. Bush attacks. He must shift the poll numbers 8 or 10 points in his favor, and that's an even bigger task. Republican strategy. Bush develops a new line of attack on Sunday night, which makes headlines on Monday. On Tuesday night, Dan Quayle continues that line of attack in his debate, which makes headlines on Wednesday. Bush picks it up on Thursday night in that debate and gets headlines on Friday. 5 days of great potential. It is George Bush's big chance and maybe his only chance. Why is Perot in it? Clinton wants him in because Perot's message hurts Bush. Bush wants Perot on stage because it's easier to look presidential when you're attacked by 2 other candidates. Why is the press in it? The reporters will ask nasty personal questions. The candidates themselves won't have to. Democratic propaganda. All Clinton needs, they say, is a draw. Truth. We hope our guy annihilates Bush. Republican propaganda. They say Clinton is a great debater who will do very well. Truth. Bush is at least as good a debater as Clinton. Context of the debates, the Republicans lost the presidential election in September, so they want to hold another presidential election in October, and the debates give them an opportunity for a fresh start. If George Bush has something new to say, this might work. Tom?
And we'll both see all of these folks there.
We will indeed.
Sunday night. St.
Sunday
Louis.
night.
Okay, fine. Also,
we have a $10 billion job retraining program, so I think that Governor Clinton ought to make up his mind and come down on one side or the other. But the fact is, he said he's for it, and I think that part is positive. Labor unions don't like it. They think it'll export jobs, and I am absolutely convinced it will create good American jobs in the export business.
A good agreement benefits everybody. It benefits all 3 equally.
Well, I'm convinced of it, and of course they are. We have a free trade agreement with Canada itself, and since that agreement, exports to Canada have soared, meaning new jobs. So I don't see how they can take the argument that it's going to hurt. I'm convinced it will help. Now, if you're a protectionist and you want to shrink markets, then you oppose it. But we are not. I am for free and fair trade.
We'll ask you a few more questions. We'll take a break and go to calls.
Let's do it.
Are you geared for the debate?
Yeah, I'm getting ready, Larry.
You're doing training?
No, not yet.
I read where John Sununu is playing somebody in the debate.
Well,
how do you do
I don't
that?
know.
What
we haven't done it yet. The way we used to do it was we had when I was debating against Geraldine Ferraro, which has got to have been another historic first. Lynn Martin played her, and she would ask, I'd answer a question, then she'd jump in and challenge me. It turned out, in terms of history, that Lynn was much tougher than Geraldine was going, So you can overtrain for these things, but it helps to get some questions. We haven't started that. Well, you can get your mind cluttered up with facts, factoids, and I don't want to do that. I want to stay on the main principles of why our agenda for American renewal is the best to move this country forward.
Governor Clinton said the other night that you're a terrific debater, that you're looking to downplay it because you know you do well. You're a Yale graduate. He's a Yale graduate. Mr. Perot, he hasn't debated in a long time, but he debated at Annapolis. It should be interesting.
Well, it should be interesting, I'll say that. I've never considered myself a star debater. I think I'm good on principle, and I think I'm good on making tough decisions, and I hope that comes through. But we'll see. I don't consider myself as one, hey, we can get 5 debating points from the Indiana debate coach that's watching or anything like that.
How much do you think, Mr. President, is dependent on these debates?
I don't know. I think some, but not all. I don't know that a debate has ever decided anything. They always cite the Kennedy-Nixon debates, where people listening to it on the radio thought Nixon won, and people watching it thought Kennedy won. But I don't know. We don't think that it's, be-all, end-all.
In this city,
but it does give you a chance to stand up there and say, here's what I'm for. No filters. People don't need a Monday morning quarterback. You have just heard this or that. They get it whether they need it or not, but it goes right to the people.
So you're not nervous about it?
No, not nervous. Not particularly excited about it.
In this city, a couple of weeks ago, Leslie Stahl of CBS made a speech and said that there's a Bush blacklist, that there are people you won't talk to. Dan Rather, Peter Jennings.
Hey, I've talked to Dan Rather, don't you remember?
I remember. She says now, though, is there anyone you won't talk to? Is there any...
No, but there's some programs that's not worth going on. I like to go where you get a fair shake. I like to go where you get the answer out there. And I think some are objective and some are pejorative the way they ask questions. So you can be a little bit selective, but there's no blacklist. I believe I've done almost every program. I haven't done talk shows in terms of these Sunday shows since I've been president, and I don't intend... Well, why? Why do them? I mean, I can get my message out in a wide array of other ways, but there's no blacklist to it. I've talked to Leslie Stahl several times, not in the last few years that I can recall, but...
But there's no list of people that George Bush will not speak to.
No.
But there are some programs.
Hey, listen, I'm human. I got a list of people I respect in your business, and I got a list that I keep inside of me for whom I've lost respect. But isn't that human? Isn't that the way nature...
Of historic old San Antonio, Texas. We're a stone's throw from the Alamo. This is the area they call La Velita, or Little Town. We're right on San Antonio's famous Riverwalk. This is one of the garden spots of Texas, the adopted home of the President of the United States. We're actually at what they call the Arneson River Theater. There's a proscenium where the audience is over there. The river is between us, and the President and I are on the stage. This was, by the way, a WPA project of President Roosevelt's back in 1939, designed to beautify this city. One other note, we'll be taking our calls through Atlanta. The numbers domestically are 404-221-1855, and if you're outside the United States, 404-827-1201. Another note, the reason for the President's quick return, he was with us Sunday night. That program was on tape. We did it at the White House, and the President felt, and quite most people agreed, that it would not be proper to take phone calls at the White House. But he said the next time we have an availability, we would do it. We're doing it tonight. This is a historic evening for 2 reasons. This is the First time an incumbent president has done a national phone-in program since March 5th, 1977, when President Carter appeared with Walter Cronkite. And this is the world's only live call-in talk presentation, so we're being seen in over 150 countries. The president was here today for that trade agreement, a historic day, an agreement, by the way, which your opponents, Mr. Perot, disagrees with. But Mr. Clinton the other night said he agrees with, except he wants to clear up the part about the environment and jobs. Your comment?
My comment is that it's a most historic agreement. And you could hear President Salinas say that today, this marvelous neighbor of ours, the President of Mexico. You could hear our neighbor to the north, Brian Mulroney, say it. And all three of us felt that this was something that will be remembered in history, the initialing of this agreement. In terms of saying the environmental part hasn't been worked out, it's been endorsed by the largest environmental group in the United States. I think in terms of the jobs part being worked out,
Car Factory. All you really need to know is you can save thousands off new car prices with nearly new executive buybacks. Don Miguel Toyota's Used Car Factory has fully reconditioned Corollas, Camrys, and Tercels available now. New car benefits without the new car price. Qualify for new car finance rates, remaining factory warranties, and low mileage. Get with the program. Program cars at Don Miguel Toyota's Used Car Factory. Katy Freeway between Kirkwood and Jerry Ashford.
All banks say their people are special.
Your plans for the future.
But you want facts, not fluff.
And our retirement.
Our bankers average 11 years experience.
Based on what you have now, we'll calculate
2 out of 3 are qualified to sell mutual funds or annuities. Most bankers aren't.
And the mutual fund.
Ours are knowledgeable about all our products.
We'll build from
And
there.
they'll take time to
Then
discuss
another
them
year,
with you.
We'll take another look, make sure you're right on track.
Sound like your kind of people? Bank United, working with you, for you.
It's the all-new Fright Fest. Only at Astroworld, Houston's biggest Halloween bash. Brought to you by your local Coca-Cola bottler. Every Friday night and all day Saturdays and Sundays. Save $5 off admission when you bring in any Coca-Cola product. Get thrilled by our rides. Visit our new Haunted Motel. Attend a Monster Bash. Fright Fest at Six Flags Astroworld. There's so much. If it doesn't scare you, you're not alive.
This is CNN.
Welcome to Larry King Live from San Antonio. Tonight, the President of the United States and you. He came to Texas to sign a trade deal, but he's staying to take your calls. As the campaign moves into its final phase, it's a rare opportunity to talk to George Bush live. Now, here's Larry King.
Welcome to this Wednesday night edition of Larry King Live. We are broadcasting from the heart.
A tailor devotes his time to making uniforms for the soldiers. This shoe store used to make high-fashion women's footwear, and now the Serb, Croat, and Muslim cobblers are making boots for the military. Adam used to live in Germany in the 60s. There he gained invaluable experience.
It was during the Vietnam War, and I used to make boots for the U.S. Army. I never thought I'd be doing it here more than 20 years later.
These car mechanics never imagined they'd now be making wood-burning stoves. Both soldiers and civilians need them because there isn't enough fuel to power the electric cookers. All of this amounts to a token gesture toward the city's defense, but after pleading in vain for the world to help, the people of Sarajevo are now beginning to realize that they've been left to fend for themselves. Christiana Manpour, CNN, Sarajevo.
That concludes this edition of Prime News in Washington. I'm Bernard Shaw. Thanks for joining us. Good night, Susan.
Good night, Bernie. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Susan Rook. A special edition of Larry King Live is up next. Here's Larry.
Thanks, Susan. The special edition is from San Antonio. The guest is President George Bush. Your phone calls will be included next. Don't go away.
Coming up, Larry King Live, followed by World News after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
It's unbelievable. Gimmicks, coupons, phony sales, rude salespeople. I mean rude salespeople. I need St. James.
St. James Furniture, Houston's only furniture store that looks like you created it.
You'll see St. James. It's wonderful.
Get with the program. You know, program cards from Don McGill's Used Car.